Hello and welcome to a new series we're going to be doing on Subway Builder. So Subway Builder is a new game that was just released as a beta on their website, subwaybuilder.com, and this game is pretty interesting because it's a very data-driven, aim to be real-life type of transportation game. Directly from their website, they say Subway Builder is a hyper-realistic transit simulation game. Build a new subway system from the ground up while dealing with real-world constraints and costs. And so you'll see as we get into this game and once we start on a map, sort of how data-driven this game really is, but it really lets you get into the detail of population analysis and destinations where people come and go to. All right, and so let's start ourselves a new game. And here you can get an idea of the maps that are currently in the game. There's a pretty good handful covering most of the well-populated areas across the United States. And they range from all types of sizes. I believe Salt Lake City was the smallest one I saw at 1.3 million people, all the way up to New York at 19.5 million. And so I think to start off this series, we're going to start in a region that I'm somewhat familiar with, just to sort of help get the grips of the game. I have played through a few hours just to understand how the game works, but I really recommend starting on a map that you're somewhat familiar with, as it will help you understand a bit better, sort of, first of all, where existing transportation is and where a lot of the major destinations are in the region. And so because of that, we're going to start here in Philadelphia. This is also just a pretty decent starting city in general, as the population of 6.2 million is pretty decent, so it allows you to experiment with the two types of transit systems in the game right now, with that being heavy metro and light metro. And so you get a little bit of a taste of both. We're going to select our game mode here, and because I want this to feel a bit more like a realistic playthrough, we're going to go in normal mode. And so here we are starting in Philadelphia. We can zoom out just so you can see how far the map extends to. It does get a very good portion of the region, much farther than where the current transit system, SEPTA, expands to, but I think that's great. It allows for a lot of flexibility in play styles and how you play through the game. You can see here it's actually also 3D, so we can rotate around and see the skyscrapers in Center City and all of the suburbs as we continue to go out this way. You can see some of the major highways in the region, all the parks and other spaces. And then if we come in here to our demand stats, we can start to see all the population centers across the map. Now currently it's all gray, I believe, because we haven't started this yet, but we'll let this play a little bit and you'll see this start to pop up. Over here in the corner, you can see the three different demands: driving, walking, and transit. A lot of people will be driving, a few people will be walking, and because there's currently no transit at the moment, no one will be taking transit just yet. And then up here in the top left, we can see this table slowly starting to fill out as the game calculates where people live and where their work is, essentially. It's a somewhat simple simulation in that sense. It doesn't really seem to have any sort of tourism or recreational demand at all. It's really just where people live. They go to work and then they go back to their homes, and that's how, as I understand it, the simulation works at the moment. And so obviously the larger bubbles is larger population centers. Because we're looking at residents, this is density of where people live. So we can zoom out here. Obviously out here, farther into the suburbs of Philadelphia, these dots get a lot smaller and more spread out. And then as we get closer to the city proper, there is a lot more larger bubbles stuck closer together. Now we can switch over to workers, and this will show us where all the destinations are. So this is where everyone wants to go. So it's pretty much a requirement to have your transit lines running through these areas, or no one's going to really want to take it anywhere. So we can see our major population center is right here in Center City, Philadelphia. Over here are some universities and some other larger developments that would warrant a lot of demand. This bubble up here, I believe, is Temple University, so that obviously generates a fair bit of demand. And then down here, the airport. If we zoom out a little bit farther, you can see maybe a few other bubbles pop up here and there, but really a large portion of the destinations are going to be in the main area of the city. And so I think we're going to start off by setting up a few really basic subway lines, and just due to the nature of how Philadelphia is laid out, the beginning of it is going to be very similar to the SEPTA transit map. So we're going to have a line running up and down Broad Street, which is the main north-south road in Philadelphia, and then another line running east-west on Market Street, which is also the other main street that intersects right here at City Hall. So I think those are going to be our two starting lines. That really makes the most sense pretty much any way you look at it. All of the jobs are right here in the middle of the city. You can see pretty easily an east-west line would cover most of the workers in the area. And then as for residents, there's so many of them all around the area. We don't really have to be too picky or choosy about where our lines pick people up from quite yet. And so we'll get a small base going so we can start bringing money in, and then we can dive a little bit deeper as we stray away from real life and start to really get into the fun of this game, which is reimagining how some of these cities can work with subways. And so the way building works in this game is you start by building blueprints, which then you can build. Unfortunately, not yet. There is no way to sort of build multiple blueprint or partial blueprints. So you really have to sort of take it one small chunk at a time. You can't really plan out a huge network and build it in chunks. You sort of have to build with this blueprint tool a little bit and then buy it. So it's a little bit restrictive in that way, but the game does get updates frequently, and hopefully that'll be one of the things that comes out soon. And here, first we need to build a station. And so to get started, we're going to need to build a station, and it's either going to have to be heavy metro or light metro. We can hover over these to see some of the details, and we can even get into the actual performance of each one. The main differentiator I can tell here is light metro is lower capacity and less cost, and heavy metro is much higher capacity and a little bit higher cost. There's a little bit of difference between acceleration and speeds. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be as close as they are, because there's really no difference in speeds between light metro and heavy metro, but you can see the difference in capacity and costs. So I think what we're going to do is have our main two lines be heavy metro, and then most likely the rest of our lines will be light metro. But then coming back to building our stations, we can either build a single track station, a parallel track station, or a quad track station. I think for the most part, especially in the early game, we'll be building parallel stations, as that allows for an easy two-way subway track. So if we did single, we'd sort of be forced into a one-way system, which could be good for a loop or a circle or something special. Quad tracks are primarily used for if we're going to have sort of express lines or some other type of situation that would require us to need more than two. And then, of course, the elevation, which does have associated costs with it. From 0 to -2 is considered an at-grade station, which of course would be very cheap as there's little land to move and logistics. And then as you go deeper, that slowly goes up in cost. Once you get really deep, it gets twice as much. And then I believe the max is this, a deep bore. which is 4.5 times the cost. I don't think there's any real case where you would go this deep, except for maybe some spots in some of the heavier populated cities, such as New York. But what we can do is turn on the minimum tunnel depth, and this sort of displays the way I imagine it is how deep the foundations of all these buildings are. Because this game tries to be as realistic as possible, you do have to avoid buildings or risk paying for the demolition of that building. Now, some of it's a bit unrealistic. As you can see, we can demolish City Hall for 500 million. I don't think we would ever demolish City Hall in any realistic scenario just for a subway station. But in a lot of these smaller areas, especially where it's more of these smaller homes, you can see they're a lot cheaper to get rid of. But that also means that we could lose some of those people using our stations. And so as you can see here, a lot of our minimum tunnel depth is between the 10 to 14 meter range. I believe a lot of it is really just 10. So if we bring this down to 11, we can pretty much get under most buildings. And so due to how Center City is sort of laid out, there's not really a good spot where we can get a nice cheap station in here for 1x or even 0.3x. That's just completely unrealistic in this area. So I think we're going to go 11 meters down, or however deep we need to go to avoid demolishing any of these buildings. So I think this will be good. And you can see here, we haven't actually built anything. This is still part of our blueprint, but this does build a station. It automatically names it based on the street names. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to get the exact street name that you want, especially if you know the area. Sometimes it's a little bit off, but usually you just have to delete and replace the station, and it'll usually try to name as close of a street as possible to the station. So you can see this one's labeled Broad Street. That's the north-south road that runs through here. And what we can do now is come into our demand stats. We know there's a lot of people in this area, so that pretty much covers all of our workers' demand. So I think if we can cover as many residents as possible now, that would probably be best. And it looks like our largest bubble is right here. And so I think we will build a station right in this area. So we'll get this station built right there. That's on Spruce Street. We can come in, pull this up again, and we might space these out a bit more. You'll see once we start running the simulation, people are willing to walk, or I guess they could also be taking a bus, but they're willing to go pretty far from the subway stations. So they don't necessarily have to be as close together as they are in real life. Now, maybe farther in the future, once we're making a ton of money, that would be a nice goal to make something that seems realistic. But for now, I think if we come down here and build a station at this intersection, this will probably be a good one to have. And so you can see now here we have two stations labeled Broad Street. I know this is not Broad Street. I think I'd like to try to get this Cross Street to be the name of the station. So we just have to replace this a few times until we get what we want. All right, so it seems like we're going to be stuck with this station saying Broad Street. I believe this is Washington Ave, which is another major, well, major-ish cross street through Philadelphia. We continue going south. It looks like we could get a station down here, and that'll be pretty close to some other population centers. So I think this intersection would be a good spot to have one. And then coming all the way down into really far south Philly, this is sort of where I start to have a few issues with how the simulation runs. Pretty much this whole area along the river and down this way this is all mainly shops, and then down here is a lot of the stadiums for the region. So in real life, these would generate a ton of demand. Now, granted, those would be every few days, which could be something cool to see implemented if every few days there's an event and we sort of get an influx in some random area of the city for transit. But obviously, you can see the game doesn't really calculate that. There is a decent amount of workers needed here, so that does help with some of the demand, but I feel like if there's a football game or a baseball game, we'd be getting more of the demand that we sort of see in this area of the city concentrating down here. And that's just not something that's really encapsulated in the simulation quite yet. And so I think if we could get one more station right here, that would cover a pretty good portion of South Philly that uh, our subway would be able to get to. And then I think our next step is to go a few stations north, and that'll give us a pretty robust line throughout the city that should pretty much make us a decent amount of money straight away. Now, we do want to be conscious of how much money we're spending. We can switch over to this cost tab and see how much everything costs. So it breaks it out into our stations, how deep each one is, and then when we start building tracks, you'll even see that start to pop up in here. So we start out with $3 billion. We're already spending $500 million pretty much just on stations. So we can't go too crazy right away. I think we can turn off our minimum tunnel depth at the moment and just continue traveling north. So we'll pull up demand stats. Right here seems to be a good intersection. This one would be as well. Those might be a little close together, but I do think it's important to make sure we're covering those people. And so now we have those two intersections covered. And I think at the moment we'll just go one more up, because if we take a look at our workers here, there's a huge bubble right here at Temple University that would be great to get in our transit network. So we'll come in here and then we will build a station. Another helpful thing is to sort of zoom out and imagine what some of your future lines could be. So we're obviously going to have some east-west lines running up here farther in the future. So if we could find a good road in this area that runs east-west to work as an intersection, I think that would be best. And so looking east-west in this area, there's really not that many great roads. There's this one that runs a little bit farther, so maybe we can go there. It will be a short distance to this other station, but I think given that we're covering a huge demand center, it's worth it. And so I think that's going to be the extent of our first line. So now what we're going to do is come in and build tracks, and it's as simple as pretty much clicking from one end of a station to the other. If they're all in a straight line, this makes it really easy. And then we can build this in chunks if we want. You can see it shows the speed limit too. For instance, you'll see here when we get these sharp curves, but nothing is ever too crazy when it comes to that. Now we will want to make sure that we have a lower set of tracks here, because if we do go up, the tracks do slope, and so you'll see as we go higher, it starts to want to delete some of the buildings. And so we can build something like that, and that keeps all of our buildings intact. I think obviously the goal is to try not to remove any buildings if possible, but I'm sure once we start doing some lines that aren't in real life, we might have to demolish a few buildings here and there to make some of those lines work. But now with all of our stations built and all of our tracks built as well, the last thing we have to do is add these crossover bits. And it's really easy. You can do it either at the intersection of any two segments of track. So you can see here where we built this curved segment, we had to stop. You can build a crossover there, or it automatically snaps to the ends of each station. Now really all you need is one on the end of each line if you're just running a local line all the way up and down a certain set of tracks. Now if you wanted to only have maybe a shorter run, that runs more frequently, you would need to add a crossover track for those trains to be able to turn around. But for now, the way we're going to run this, one on each end will be just fine. And so then what we can do is click over to our costs. We'll see this will cost just under 1 billion, so we'll lose about a third of our money, and that's before we even start buying trains. We'll build that. Now this has been officially built. But now what we can do to actually start this line is to come into our routes, start a new route. Now, the way I'm going to do this is just alphabetical. I don't really have a naming system to go with, colors and shapes and letters. So if you guys know of anything that you would like to see implemented as our naming convention, let me know. I'm willing to try out a whole bunch of things, but I think for now we're going to go alphabetical for our lines and then maybe also change the colors here and there. But now that that's been created, we can come in, edit the route, and it's as simple as clicking a plus on each station, and then you'll want to make sure you come back on the line since we want it to stop at every station going north and south. And the nice thing about this game is it automatically calculates the most logical layout of stations. So you saw I missed this station and I just clicked it, and you can see it automatically calculates that, of course, I would want this in sequence between this station and that station, and adds that right in with the queue. And so we'll make sure we confirm the changes. So now this line is officially set up, and then we get into our trains. So for heavy metro, the base is 5 cars. We could go up to 10 cars, but I don't think that's anywhere near needed quite yet until we have many more lines feeding into this one. And then we have our service frequency, which is split up into 3 segments: high demand, which you can see the hours it runs through there, which is pretty much just peak rush hours in the morning and afternoon. Medium demand, which runs early morning, midday, and late afternoon. And then low demand, which is pretty much overnight, where not many people would be out either way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start out with one train on each of these. Because this is our only line and it is a major line, we are going to run a train during low demand. Sometimes you don't really want to do that, especially out in areas where there's very low population. You'll just never get the amount of people for that line to be profitable. But for an area like this, having some low demand coverage will be useful. And then you'll want your high demand usually always to have more trains than any of the others. But before we can add more trains, we need to buy more cars, as you can see by this warning. For heavy metro, we can buy them in groups of 5. I think we'll start off with a group of 20 cars. Now, the way this works is because even though we have 3 trains set up, we still only need 5 cars for that because they're not going to be running at the same time. So we can get up to 4 trains running at one time because we bought 20 cars and each train is 5 cars. I'm not sure why this warning is showing up because I believe the way the math works, we should, in theory, be able to run this line with the amount of cars we have. But anyway, our service frequency, that's pretty much how we determine the effectiveness of this line. So I think, in my personal opinion, during high demand, you want somewhere between 5 to 8 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes of frequency. That just seems about right when you have a lot of people trying to get to work. 5 to 10 minute wait time isn't too bad. Medium demand, I'd like to target somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes. That's usually times you wouldn't expect to get a subway right away. You'd probably be expecting to wait a little bit. And then, of course, the low demand would be very low. Usually probably 20 minutes plus or not at all, given that there's hardly any expectation that people will be out during that time. So I think we'll start with this 3, 2, 1 for our high, medium, and low demand. And at this point, everything is set up for us to hit play and start running. So you'll see we already have a train out. It is the middle of the night, so that's why there's only one. And then you'll also see these red dots moving around, and this is essentially a population node moving to the station, or in this case, it seems like it's moving away from the station. But those all represent a group of people. I don't believe the game calculates single individuals. So I believe like this is probably a group of 40 or 50 people. Those will all go to this station, and then they have a destination somewhere. We can confirm. We'll click on this station. We should be able to see them pop in. We'll try to catch it. Or it looks like we missed it, but that's how the simulation sort of works. You'll see these red bubbles move to and from the stations, and that's representative of the population moving through our subway system. And so now you can see we just crossed into the medium demand hours. So now we have 2 trains on here. We don't have to do anything. The game automatically handles all of that. And then I believe when 6 a.m. rolls around is when high demand starts. We'll see 3 trains pop up on here, and we should be able to start seeing a lot of people using our subway. And so here's those 3 trains. You can see a lot of people are now heading to the stations to get to work. We'll speed this up. And at this point, we can also start to take a look at our station ridership. So this pretty much shows how many people are coming and going through each station on our line. I believe this is on a 24-hour clock, so our line hasn't been running for 24 hours, so these numbers are just going to keep going up until then, and then that'll be pretty well representative of the amount of people that we move in a day. We can see the breakdowns here of our stations and how many people are there specifically. You can break this out even farther into the people that are specifically using each stations to either get to work or get to their home. I'm not exactly sure which way this is worded, but it seems like this is people's sort of home stations. So people who live here come to this station when they want to go somewhere or to come home. And then this station here, our Center City Broad Street station, is the station that people use to get off and go to work, or come from work to get onto to go home. So that's sort of how you can read this. And then once we get to multiple lines crossing and intersecting, there's this transfers. I'm not sure why the ends are shown as transfers. I assume you could probably argue there's buses or something running in the background that would generate this, but we don't have any physical transfers here for our subway system, so I suppose maybe that's just a quirk that we can pretty much just pretend that it's buses, and that would make some kind of sense. And then the other thing is route ridership, which is pretty useless at the moment given that we only have 1 line, but you can see how many people have ridden your line in the past 24 hours. And then the last thing that's pretty cool is there's almost sort of like a Google Maps functionality in this where you can pretty much select a start destination. So if you were on your home city, you could sort of imagine this commute. So we can click down here. We can click our destination. Maybe we want to go all the way up here. And then it gives us basically instructions on how, if we wanted to go from one spot to another using our own transportation system, we can see this would take 44 minutes, 9 minutes of walking, an 8-minute train ride, and then 25-minute walk out to here. So I think that's pretty cool. There's obviously not much functionality in that unless you're trying to maybe troubleshoot some problem areas that you're trying to reach, or figure out the most efficient way to get from one destination to another if you're trying to reach like some really high densely populated area. But I think this is a pretty neat thing to mess around with, and I think once we have more lines, this will show multiple options so you can sort of compare and contrast and help you diagnose why one line might be outcompeting another. And then one of the last few useful data points here is this whole financial dashboard that we get. So here we can see how much our fair price is. Currently it's $3, which is by default, which we'll leave it at the moment. Obviously, if we raise it, we can get more money, but obviously that lowers demand. We could lower this if we want more people using it, but obviously that will lower our profits in return, most likely. You can see a breakdown, so you can see total revenue, expenses. You can see what's contributing to each. So if you're buying things or building things, you can see how much of your budget that's sort of taking away in your expenses. And then scrolling down, there's some pretty handy charts which will help you more specifically with your low, medium, and high demand situations. So you can see our hourly breakdown of some of our low demand areas. Now, more than likely, you're going to be running at a loss here. That's just the nature of public transportation. But then you can see as we get into our peak hours, our high demand, those are usually your most profitable hours. Now, this also can be toggled to a daily time chart, which is over the last 14 days, and then as well as an all time, which will get really interesting to see when you're a couple of dozen days into your playthrough, and you can really see how you've grown over time and everything like that. And that applies to all these charts down here. So I think we're going to take a look at our daily for the moment, just because that'll probably give us the most information so we can see what we're making day over day. We see our balance over time. Now this chart's going to be pretty slow moving and somewhat uneventful in the beginning because money does come pretty slow, as you'll see later on. Our operational profit, which is basically the real amount of money that we're earning. So right now we're earning about 14 million each day. And then we have our expense breakdown, which is pretty handy. If you hover over it, you can see what percentage is going into your expenses. And so what I think we're going to do is I'm going to quickly build another line going east-west on Market Street. So that'll be another pretty well densely populated line that we'll be servicing. That should also start bringing us in a decent amount of money as well. And then we'll see where we are with money after that. But once we have those two lines set up, we might just have to sit and wait for a little bit to earn some money before we can start thinking about some of the other crazy expansions we can start to do farther in the future. And so really quick, as I'm building this second line, it'll be pretty useful to go over how transfer stations work. So really, I found that they simply work just by crossing over your stations, and they'll automatically combine into a group. So we can see here we have our Broad Street station, and then if we run this line going this way, and so now we have this station built, you can see that this name sort of combined into one Broad Street. That pretty much means that this is now a station group. I think as long as these blue areas are touching, it's sort of considered a transfer. So if we put a station up here, for instance, this wouldn't work as a station group because I believe the game considers this too far away for people to just be able to walk and get on there. So I don't think people will get off here and walk to this station. I believe the way the simulation works is they have to be touching for it to be a transfer. So we'll get rid of that station. And you might have noticed, but we had to build this 5 meters either below or above the other stations so that we can get them to cross over without having any conflicts. So we went 5 meters deeper. It's still just as expensive as it was always going to be, but because this is the only area that we're intending on being a transfer, we can have all of our other stations back up to the cheaper minus 5 meters, and that pretty much covers it for transfer. So we'll build out the rest of this line. We'll be back once that's built out, and then we'll start taking a look at some of the info that we can get from our system. Alright, and so after our first 7 days, we get a little notification here. This is a cool, neat little thing in the background of this game. I think it's 7 days, we sort of get like a newspaper report sort of an idea of how people view our subway system right now. So you can read this if you want. I'm not going to go through and read all of this, but back to business. You can see our other line that we built through here. So this is pretty true to real life SEPTA at the moment. The stations are a bit more spread out, but I think that's just due to the nature of this game. Having your stations spread out is much more efficient at first, so that you're not sort of double dipping into some of the different population centers. So having them more spread out like this sort of guarantees that you're going to cover a larger population base. And then on the note of sort of background things that bring this game to life, if we go into the menu here, we have this transit feed, which you can see people posting about your transportation network. You can see sort of the good things, the bad things people are talking about, like why does Independence Mall get a station but not my neighborhood? 1 billion spent already. These are just automatically generated things to bring the game to life a little bit, and I think this is a neat detail. I wish it was a bit more accessible and wasn't sort of hidden in sort of the menu, but it's neat to sort of scroll through this and see what's happening. Also, if you really want to, there is a news archive where you can see your previous news articles. Small things like that will really help bring this game to life. But as you can see, both of our lines are running pretty well. We've let it run for about 2 days now. You can see I have our trains list up, and I've just been monitoring how full our trains are getting. We do get a warning up in this corner if our trains do end up running full. So we'll get a little pop-up notification just letting us know that one of our trains is full, and maybe that means we need to increase the amount of trains we have or make those trains larger. But we can start to analyze how our system as a whole is doing. So you can really see here in our revenue graph when we built our second line and when it really sort of started to come into effect. So you can see we pretty much doubled our revenue. Again, you can see our balance really dip due to the construction. This is obviously the thing that matters the most, our operational profit. So now it seems we're making about $30 million a day, which is double the 15 that we were doing before. So that's a good thing. We still have 1 billion left to build with. So given the fact that each of these lines has taken about 1 billion, we could probably afford to either expand these a bit more or build another line. And so I think given that we've covered all of the major work areas in the city, a third line might not be the best use of our money at the moment. I think maybe what would be best is to expand our lines. So maybe our A line that runs north-south, expanding that up farther to capture more of this population area. North Philly is very full of people that will most likely need to get somewhere in Center City. There's also this whole region here out in West Philadelphia. So we could also extend this line this way a little bit more. There's a good amount of population across the river into New Jersey, but I don't think we're going to start tapping into that just yet. So I think what we're going to do to pretty much end off this video is building this line up a few stations and then building our B line out a few stations, and we should be able to cover a good portion of the major areas of Philadelphia with just those two lines. And so I think the easiest one to expand will be our A line. So we'll continue going north. We'll keep our stations at -5. There's no reason to go above or below that. We can't even intersect roads with how densely populated it is, so this is just all going to be underground. And because we saw this is pretty well evenly spaced out areas, I don't think we're going to be really looking much at our demand stats for this. We're pretty much just going to place these at major intersections where we might be able to place future transfers. So this intersection seems like a pretty big one. Now, this, I believe, is a highway, so we're not really going to intersect with that. However, this intersection might be a good one to connect to. Maybe we can have something run off this way. And let's just see how far out we're building. Yeah, I think we could probably go one more station before we start to hit some lower population areas. So I think one more station, it looks like right here maybe. It almost seems like we can sort of see where the stations are just based on the road map. I'm not too familiar with this area, so I'm not really sure if this is actually where the subway stations are or not, but it could be another type of public transportation area, but we'll get this in. I think we'll get this right here. And I believe that'll be a good stopping point. I really actually want to bring it to this intersection and then we'll stop. So that's where we're going to stop. It looks like we could reach a good ending point right here, but we're not going to do that just because the population whittles out so much out in that direction. We're not going to waste our money going out there at the moment. And then we can just as easily connect all of these stations together because they're all in a straight line. There's really nothing to worry about. We can add a crossover at this station. Now we can just keep the crossover that we have existing here. There's really no point to remove it once you build it. It could be useful in the future. Looks like we actually missed one station, so we'll put that in. We'll have to unfortunately add another crossover. They are a little bit expensive at 15 million per crossover. So it's a bit unfortunate, but I think it's fine. So that brings us down to 350 million. And we'll expand our line first because we will definitely need to add some more train cars for this. And then, as I said before, it's as simple as just clicking the plus on each station and make sure we're covering both sides when we need to. And the game does the rest in terms of the order and the routing. So we can hit confirm. We can come back here to our trains, and we can see now our high demand line is coming every 15 minutes, which is just far too much of a spread for me. I think we'll get 5. 4 might be a bit better cost effectively, but let's go with 5. We can always cut down on trains. I think low demand will go to 2, medium demand will go to 3, and that'll be good for this line. We will leave that and let the game play out. So it's going to be a while before we can get some accurate numbers on how well this portion of our subway system is going to do. So while we wait for that, we can build out this way. And we will have to start to be aware of our money because 350 million will not get us that many stations. It might get us 2 or 3 if we're lucky out in this area. And so we have that, and we're currently at 300 million. It looks like we'll be okay. We'll connect up these 2 stations. So just like that. We'll add a crossover right here. And it looks like we're going to be just short. I think those tracks are actually pretty expensive. So maybe what we're going to have to do just for now is not build this station, and we'll just build this one station. It'll cost us 200 million, but I do think it'll be worth it to get one more station out in this direction. And then we'll have to buy another batch of train cars so that we can get our high demand frequency up to 8 minutes. Our medium demand I think is okay at 13 minutes, and our low demand is also okay, I think. But overall, I think now we're starting to see a pretty decent subway system that will hopefully start to bring in some money so we don't have to wait so long to build. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with where our system is. Let's do a quick rundown of where it's at the moment. I believe we've let this run a little bit, or at least enough to start gathering some useful information from it. So let's first take a look at our demand stats. And as a whole in the region, you can start to see how many people are using transit compared to driving or walking. So these dots sort of blend the colors in the area. So these sort of maroonish colored or purple colored dots are people that are sort of half driving, half walk, or half transit. And then this yellowish brown sort of color, I imagine, is probably a mix of walking and transit. And so we can see up here, we're currently reaching about 2.3% of the population with our transit. And it's a pretty small start, but you can see the little blue dots starting to pop up in some areas. I'm not sure what a good transit percentage would be. I'm not sure if 50% would be too high or not. I think 50% could be a good long-term target to reach. That would certainly help real life with traffic and everything, but we'll just have to see how realistic that 50% target could be once we get later into this game. And then we can analyze our route ridership, where our A line is doing almost twice as good as our B line, which makes sense given that the A line is much larger and covers many more people than our B line. But I do think that they are doing both very important work in terms of getting people around. And then the last one is our station ridership. So you can see we've had 42,000 people coming through this central transfer station. That's a pretty good number. And then you can sort of see the rest of the numbers throughout the line. So almost 10K at all of our other stations on the A line. And then our B line is probably averaging about 6 or 7K at each station on that line. And so here's where we can see the breakdown a bit more of people using stations to get to work or to get to home. So you can see really why the A line is doing so much better is we're getting all of these people on the north side of the line using it to come from home or get to home. You can see the B line is really only at the ends, and then obviously for work it's really just those middle stations here. And then to round off the end of this video, we'll take a quick overview of our financials. So our revenue versus expenses over time, you can see sort of each time we've made an upgrade to our system. This was when we built the B line. We sort of doubled our revenue then. And we just got a news pop-up. You can see it looks like celebrating our B line. So that's exciting to see. And then this jump in revenue is when we made our major upgrades. So we almost doubled again. Looks like we're just shy of 90 million revenue. And then our operational profit since then has been just over 50 million. And here's where you can start to see what I mean by it's going to be a little bit slower at this point. There's going to be a lot more waiting between building. We'll probably be skipping some days between videos just to build up some money, since you can see it's pretty much almost always a handful of millions of dollars to build something. And when you're only bringing in 50 million a day, that doesn't even cover the cost of one station. So I think we're going to let this sit a few days between videos so that we can build up that money. But other than that, I think we got ourselves off on the right foot, and I'm pretty excited to see where we can go with this subway system. We've sort of stayed pretty true to the real life SEPTA subway system in Philadelphia. So let me know your ideas. If you guys have any fictional lines or lines that you want to see me make, I think it'd be cool to have a line that sort of follows the river up this way. There is a major highway, 76, that runs up this way. So I think it'd be cool to have a train that runs sort of along it, especially since this highway is very notorious for bad traffic. So that could be something fun to explore. If there's other lines that you guys think would be fun to explore, maybe we have a subway loop that goes around sort of the main portion of the city. And then of course any naming conventions you guys have that might make a bit more sense than just this A, B system that I got going. I think following this, the next line would be C, then D, and so on. It's pretty boring, so if you guys can get creative and efficient with some system, I'd love to probably try it out. And I don't think we're really going to drag this series out too much. We'll probably keep each city to a few videos, and maybe we'll explore 2 or 3 cities. I would like to see what sort of the late game looks like in this, once we're sort of consistently bringing in money and able to expand into the far reaches of the city limits. That'll be fun to explore, but I don't think we're going to stick around for a dozen videos or so on a single map. So that's another thing to look forward to. These are going to be a bit more fast-paced videos than what I usually do on the channel, but I think it will be a good breath of fresh air to try out this new game. And so with that, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.